On the afternoon of January 3rd, 2024, a man walked up to his neighbor's front door in Pensacola, Florida. He was calm, friendly even. He had a story ready. He told her that his ex-girlfriend had been kidnapped.
She's been kidnapped. The mom. Now that's what he told me. I don't know.
Nobody has even reported her missing yet.
The neighbor hadn't heard anything about a kidnapping. The family hadn't used that word. No missing persons report had even been filed yet. As far as the outside world was concerned, a young woman had simply not come home. But he knew. He knew she'd been taken. He knew the word for it. And then he asked to look at her phone. She handed it over. He scrolled through her security footage. Cameras that faced directly toward the house next door, the house where his ex-girlfriend had been living, and he deleted it. Video after video, gone. Then he left.
I've already sent this man. You don't deleting the footage. You don't need a copy of that, do you? I already have a copy.
Her name was Kayla Atwood. She was 32 years old, a single mother of 4 children, the youngest still in diapers, the oldest not yet 12. She was funny and warm and deeply loved by her family. She had her whole life threaded through those kids, and somewhere between 2:20 in the afternoon and 2:50 on an ordinary Wednesday in January, she simply vanished from the face of the earth. The man who came to delete the footage, he had an explanation for everything. He had an alibi. He even had someone else he thought investigators should be looking at instead. What he didn't know was that his own phone had been keeping a record. Kayla Atwood was 32 years old, and she was in the middle of figuring things out. She had 4 children, a daughter nearly 12, a 7-year-old, and 2 little ones still young enough to need daycare drop-offs every morning. 4 kids across 11 years of her life, and she was raising them largely on her own. She was between jobs at the time, the way a lot of single mothers are between jobs. Not idle, just stretched. Managing school schedules and nap times and grocery runs, and the 1,000 small emergencies that don't make it onto any resume. She was close with her family, her mother Linda, her sister Lizzie, the kind of close where people notice quickly when something feels wrong. She was active on social media, which tells you something about a person, that she wanted to stay connected, wanted to share her life, wanted to be seen in the ordinary way that most of us do. She wasn't hiding, and in the days just before January 3rd, 2024, she was doing what a lot of people do when they're starting over. She was putting herself back out there. A dating app. Some new conversations. Small, hopeful steps. One of those conversations had led somewhere good. A man named Tony, a truck driver, kind enough to give her a ride to daycare 2 mornings in a row. Another conversation, from just a few weeks earlier, had led somewhere else entirely. And on the afternoon of January 3rd, both of those threads were about to intersect in a way Kayla never saw coming. There are mornings that look exactly like every other morning, and then there are mornings that are the last one. January 3rd, 2024 started the way January 2nd had. Kayla Atwood got her youngest children ready, gathered their things, and waited for a ride. Tony, a truck driver she'd been talking to on a dating app, pulled up in his Penske delivery truck. She climbed in. The kids came with her. They drove to daycare, dropped the little ones off, and Kayla rode along for the deliveries.
Kayla Atwood. Are you familiar with that name? So during my investigation, your name came up, so I want to talk to you and see if you've had any contact with Kayla or know anything about her or anything like that. But basically, the reason that we ended up here is because you drive like a yellow Penske truck, right?
Yeah.
So that yellow Penske truck is seen on video camera, and Kayla is seen getting into that. So is there anybody that you went with this week while you were dropping off tires and stuff like that?
Yeah, I had a female ride with me, but she's a dog.
She's a what?
She's a dog.
An adult?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And so what is her name?
Damn. All I know is that pretty.
Pretty?
Yeah.
The same easy, unremarkable routine she and Tony had fallen into the day before. She was home by 2:20 in the afternoon. A nearby business camera caught her returning to her house on Belmont Street. Nothing unusual, nothing to flag. 10 minutes later, a white Ford Ranger turned onto her street. She didn't know that someone had been watching. that the calls placed to police the day before, welfare checks, questions about who was at her house, who was driving that truck, hadn't come from someone who cared about her safety. She didn't know that the man who'd told her family the relationship was over had never actually let go. By 2:50 p.m., Kayla's phone went silent. No signal, no location, no trace. Her youngest children waited at daycare that evening. They waited, and their mother never came. What happened in those 30 minutes between the moment she walked through her front door and the moment her phone went dark? That's where this story lives. When Kayla's sister Lizzie filed the missing persons report on January 5th, investigators had a 3-day gap to close and very little to work with. No witnesses, no scene, no body. What they did have was a neighbor. She lived close enough to Kayla's house on Belmont Street that her security cameras pointed directly at Kayla's front door. Detectives knocked on her door during the neighborhood canvass, and what she told them stopped the investigation cold. Someone had already been there. Before Kayla was even officially reported missing, a man had shown up at her door.
My door, tell me about what's kind of going on. Well, they kidnapped the mom. Now that what he told me. I don't know.
No one has even reported her missing yet.
He told the neighbor that Kayla had been kidnapped. Then he picked up her phone, scrolled through her camera roll, and deleted multiple videos. Footage that, had it remained, would have shown exactly who came and went from Kayla's home on the afternoon she disappeared. The neighbor knew who he was. It was Male Fountain, Kayla X. The word he used, kidnapped, was one the family hadn't used publicly. No one had. Kayla had simply not come home. Investigators pulled the business security camera footage from a property near Belmont Street. It showed Kayla returning home at approximately 2:20 p.m. on January 3rd. 10 minutes later, a white Ford Ranger pulled up to her address. They had a timeline. They had a suspect. What they didn't have yet was Male Fountain's phone. And when they finally got it, what forensic examiners found inside it would either clear him completely or prove he had been lying from the very beginning. There's a moment in cases like this where you realize the investigators weren't just following Kayla's last hours. They were following Male Fountain. Every move he made in those 4 days had a shape to it, and once you see the shape, you can't unsee it. Think about what he told police.
This is on the 2nd. You hear me? I said, what's up? Can you take my kid to daycare? I said, tell your new man to do it. You hear me? Well, f*** you, Dad, I will. Alright, so I roll by there. I see her pick the kids in a big ass yellow work box truck. You know what I'm saying? Big old box truck, right?
He last saw Kayla on January 2nd. She got into that Penske truck, and that was that. He had nothing further to do with her. And then, almost as a gift, he offered them his phone. It looked like cooperation. It looked like a man with nothing to hide. But forensic examiners don't see what's on a phone. They see what used to be on a phone. And what used to be on Male Fountain's phone was a text conversation with Kayla Atwood, spanning 3.5 hours on January 3rd, the very day he said he hadn't spoken to her. Every message manually deleted, not lost, not overwritten by time, deleted deliberately by hand. That single discovery changed the entire geometry of the investigation, because now nothing he had said could be taken at face value. Not the timeline, not the claim that Tony was the person worth looking at. Not even the visit to Kayla's neighbor, the one where he accessed her phone to delete security footage and told her, before any missing persons report had ever been filed, that Kayla had been kidnapped, a word her family hadn't used yet, which raised a question investigators could no longer set aside. How did he know? On February 10th, 2026, Michael Fountain stood in a Pensacola courtroom and heard the words that would define the rest of his life. Life in prison, no possibility of parole. The jury had needed just 3 days of trial to reach him. The deleted messages, the deleted footage, the 15 minutes on Crow Road. It had all come back around. Every choice he made in the hours and days after Kayla disappeared had formed a chain, and that chain had held. Kayla's family was there. They heard the sentence read aloud. And then they said what families in that position so often say, that no number of years, no locked door, no courtroom ruling can account for what was actually taken. 4 children sat somewhere outside that room. still waiting for a mother who left for the afternoon and never came home. The eldest was nearly 12 when Kayla disappeared. She's older now. They all are. Michael Fountain was led away. His mother and stepfather, both arrested the night officers found him hiding in that closet, had already shown the world where their loyalties were. The case was closed, the verdict was in, and on paper, it looked like an ending. But there are still questions that the trial didn't fully answer. About what happened in those minutes after Kayla walked through her front door, about what was said, about what she knew or didn't know in the moments before she couldn't tell anyone. Those answers may never come. There's something the verdict didn't answer, something that never made it fully into the record, and that Kayla's family has had to carry alongside their grief. The gun was never found. Detectives knew how she died. The cause of death was confirmed at autopsy, a gunshot wound to the head. The cell data told them where he'd been. The canines led them to her. But the weapon that ended her life in those minutes between 2:30 and 2:50 on a January afternoon has never been publicly accounted for. It wasn't recovered from the burial site. It wasn't referenced as found in his home or his truck. The trial proceeded, and the jury convicted without it. That matters, not because it changes the outcome. The jury believed the evidence, and it was overwhelming. But it means somewhere there is still a gun. One that was used to kill a 32-year-old mother of 4, and then disappeared just as deliberately as everything else Male Fountain tried to make disappear. He deleted the messages, he deleted the footage, he hid in a closet under a pile of clothes. Every instinct he had in those days was to erase, and to a significant degree, on that one piece of evidence, he succeeded. Which brings you back to a question that no sentence, however just, can fully close. What else was erased? What else was buried? Not in a wooded lot off Crow Road, but in the spaces between the evidence. In the 3.5 hours of texts no one will ever read, some things the truth doesn't recover. She had 4 children. That detail has sat with us through every piece of evidence, every deleted message, every coordinate on a cell tower map, but for a moment, set all of that aside. Kayla Atwood was 32 years old. She was on the apps, which means she was trying to meet someone, maybe find a little company, maybe just get a ride to daycare on a Tuesday morning when life was hard and help was scarce. She had 4 kids aged 1 to 11, and she was managing it the way single mothers manage things, imperfectly, creatively, with whatever and whoever was available. Her eldest was almost 12, old enough to notice, old enough to remember. She never made it back to pick up her youngest children that evening. Her mother had to go instead. And in the hours before anyone used the word missing, before any report was filed, before the family had any language for what was happening, someone else already did. Someone who had been watching. Someone who had already taken steps to make sure certain things could never be proven. Kayla's last recorded movement is a 10-minute window on a January afternoon on Belmont Street. Her phone signal goes quiet at 2:50 p.m. After that, everything we know about what happened to her comes not from Kayla, but from the trail he left behind. And that trail, once investigators started pulling on it, turned out to be longer and more deliberate than anyone initially understood. There's a question that stays with you after a case like this, one that doesn't have a clean answer, and maybe isn't supposed to. Kayla Atwood did everything right. She was careful. She used a public app. She arranged her own transport. She kept her world moving for 4 children who depended entirely on her. She saw the warning signs in Male Fountain early enough to end things after 3 weeks. 3 weeks. Most of us have spent longer deliberating over a car purchase. She read the situation, and she walked away from it, and still, the system around her had multiple points of contact with what was coming. Officers responded to a welfare check at her home. Mail made multiple calls to police and child services in the days before she disappeared, calls that, in hindsight, read less like concern and more like reconnaissance, a man testing the edges of official attention. A neighbor had cameras pointed directly at the most important piece of geography in this case, and those cameras were accessed and emptied before anyone had even filed a report. None of it was enough. So the question that lingers, the one that has no comfortable resting place, isn't really about male Fountain. He's in a cell. That part is settled. The question is about the space between a woman recognizing danger and a woman being protected from it. How wide is that space still?